Bailey with Alley55 Custom, and today I'm going to show you how to paint the hood of a car. So as you can see, the hood did have some damage to it that I had repaired. It had 2 holes and a big dent. I used body plastic, Bondo, and a body patch to fix those, so you can check out the video that I did on that on our YouTube channel. When we start out with this, we are going to want to sand it with some finer sandpaper. I'm going to use 150 grit. You're going to want to use a respirator during this entire process of painting the hood and sanding it, because you do not want to breathe in any of those chemicals. Not good for you, so I recommend wearing a respirator or a mask. I'm using this one today. You're going to want to wear some clothes that you can get dirty, because this can be a messy process and the paint will stain your clothes if you get it on yourself. So I'm going to use this electric sander, and you're just going to want to take the top layer of the clear coat off. So if you prime it or when you paint it, the paint will seal to the hood properly. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Patch up another dent with Bondo right here, and then I also laid a tarp behind it. You can use drop cloth, some sort of cloth, or just a cheap plastic tarp. Doesn't matter. It makes a big difference though, because whatever you're painting, there's going to be overspray, and you do not want that to get on your ground or whatever background you have it up against. So it's very important to have something behind it to catch that overspray. What we're going to do next is I have wet, dry sandpaper right here. The finer grit is better. So what we're going to do is we are going to cut like 1/3 of it long ways. And then you fold it into thirds, just kind of overlap it. And this way, when you do use it, you can hold it, and then you can sand it, and then you can have 3 different sides. It's just easier to handle. So right now I'm just going to use it dry, and I'm going to use it over the parts that I use Bondo on, so it'll make it nice and smooth like the rest of the metal is right now. Already making a big difference, just that little bit. That's nice and smooth. Alright, and after you sand that down, you are going to want to get all of this dust off, so just make sure you really wipe it off with crap off. Because you do not want this to be underneath your primer, otherwise it is going to show all the little bumps and everything that stayed underneath it. That side's good. That's good. Alright, so what we're going to do next is we're going to apply the primer. So I just have this Rust-Oleum primer right here. And if you are going to do a really light color, we are going to want to You're going to want to use a lighter primer so you don't see the primer through the paint, but we're going to do like a really dark maroon, so it doesn't matter if you have too dark of a primer or anything like that. So I'm going to go shake this up for a minute. Alright, now it's all shaken up. You're going to want to wear a respirator or a mask during this part. This is what I'm using. Just because you don't want to breathe in all those paint fumes. Alright, so what you're going to want to do is you can have it propped up vertically against something, or you can have it laying down horizontally. Doesn't really matter too much. You just want to make sure that the primer is all mixed up, so it comes out evenly. You're going to want to stay about like a foot away, like 8 to 12 inches, something like that. But I usually stay about a foot away. That usually gives me the best coverage. So you just want to stay a foot away and just start spraying like evenly. You don't want it to be all jagged. You want to have like even strokes, otherwise it'll like overlap and kind of mess up the primer. So I'm going to go ahead and put the respirator on and do that really quickly. So it's important to seal the Bondo with primer, even if it's, like a white hood or something and you're going to paint it white. It's still important to seal the Bondo because when you paint it, it'll just create a better protection, and then it won't ruin the Bondo later down the road. It'll keep it protected over the years. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of this to give it a nice even coat, and then I will show you the end result. So I finished the first coat of the primer. Once it dries, you can see all the wet spots. I'll come in with a second coat, and then we're going to wet sand it after a few hours. We're going to let it dry for a few hours after the second coat. Then we're going to wet sand it to make it all nice and smooth, and then we're going to go ahead and paint it. And it's very important to paint when it's not too hot out. The paint's a little more forgiving than the clear coat. If you paint when it's too hot out, it's actually going to dry the paint too fast, especially the clear coat, and it's going to crack. So, the spray can of the primer I was just using, it wasn't professional grade, it wasn't like a spray gun. That can be used in a little bit hotter weather, like up to 90 degrees, but you usually want to keep it like under 80 degrees to have a good finish for the paint, and to ensure that it won't crack. So I'm going to let this dry. Just thought I would let you know the information really quickly before we start actually painting. I'll see you in a bit. Alright, so the primer is dry now. So what we're going to do is we are going to wet sand it. So we're going to take the same wet dry sandpaper. We're going to cut the last bit in half, lengthwise. We are going to use this to sand the rest of the hood now. And you want a finer grit sandpaper for this. So I just have this bucket of water right here. And you are just going to wet the sandpaper. And you're just going to go around and just start sanding. And you don't want to sand too much, you just want to make it nice and smooth. You don't want to go through the where you sand too much and you actually go through the primer. So you just want to take the very top layer off, because if you feel it, it's quite rough. So you just want to keep dipping it in the water. You do not want to let it go dry. I can already feel such a difference just with that little work. So we're just going to keep doing that until we go through the entire hood and get it all wet down and sanded until it's nice and smooth. Alright, I just finished wet sanding and it feels pretty smooth. And I had to go over a few other parts that I had missed, because it's almost inevitable to miss something the first time through, so you just gotta feel for the rough spots, and then sand it a bit more. So to clean up all of what you just sanded, you can take it, if it's a small part, you can take it out and just hose it down so you get all the residue off. What I'm going to do, since the hood's a pretty big part, is I have a rag here, and I just doused it in water, and I'm just going to go ahead and just wipe it all off. Just because you don't want that residue on there when you start. Alright, so I have everything set up to be painted. I have tarps laid down, and I have everything propped up on either boxes or the sawhorses, so I can get all the edges, because if it's laying on the ground, you're not going to be able to properly get all the edges like you want to. So to start with, you're going to want to have tarps down, have the items that you're painting propped up. Right now I'm doing 3 different items, so I have those all laid out in front of me right now. I have a big fan behind me that I'm going to turn on when I start painting. This is going to push out all the dust and all the other particles in the air, and it's going to give me a cleaner paint job. I have this big roll open and down door open, so it's going to be pushed through there. And I have this paint gun. You know, there's a little hole in the top. When you're painting, you want to make sure that stays open. It can get clogged sometimes. And if you're painting flat, like how everything's laid flat right now, you are going to want to only fill this up about halfway, because if you tilt it, you don't want it pouring out of the hole out of the top and spilling onto what you're painting. I have the paint, and you can find what paint it is. If you look inside the door, there should be a sticker. It might be in that general area, maybe not on the door, but it'll tell you the interior and exterior paint, and it'll have a little number or letters, and then you take that to a auto body paint store, and they'll mix up that exact paint for you, and then it's going to be mixed with the solvent that they give you, and then that's going to be mixed 1:1 for the ratio. And then you're going to want to mix it up, and then you're going to want to pour it through these filters so it filters out all the junk before you paint. And before you paint, you're going to wipe it down with these tack cloths. These are going to get the excess dirt, dog hair, whatever falls onto the paint off. Otherwise, you're going to be able to see it through the layers of paint, and it'll be pretty noticeable. So we're going to do that between the different layers of paint that we're going to do. You're going to do it first before you paint, and then we're going to lay a layer of paint down, and then we're going to wait 20 minutes and then put a second coat of paint on, and then we're going to let that dry. 2 coats should be enough. You always want to wear a respirator while doing this, and you want to do it when it's under like 80-90 degrees, between 50 and 90 degrees generally, otherwise it's going to be too hot or too cold for the paint. I think I've covered everything I want to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and get everything mixed up, and then start painting. And then after all of this dries, you have to wait a few hours before you do the clear coat. So after all this dries, I'll show you how to do the clear coat as well. It's also very important to clean out your paint gun right when you're done, because you do not want your paint gun getting clogged up. I have this paint thinner, and if you just run it through your paint gun a few times, take out the needle and scrub down all the parts with it, it'll get it nice and clean so your paint gun doesn't get ruined. So one more thing before I get started that is pretty important that I forgot to mention. When you paint, you're going to want to stay about 8 to 12 inches away, and then you're going to want to keep the nozzle flat with the item that you're painting at all times. So you don't want to angle it, otherwise it'll push the paint and it'll ripple it. So you want to just keep it flat, so you kind of have to like swivel your arm when you do it to keep it flat with the item that you're painting. So here are the parts I just finished painting. I'm doing the bumper, the hood, and also the top of the tailgate. It was peeling really bad, so I sanded it and just repainted it. So they look really good. They need a clear coat still. It's like a nice smooth texture. Some dust on it, but we'll get that off. We have the clear coat that we're going to use. So this is the clear coat and the hardener. So this is the MS78 and this is the MH78S. And on the side here, it tells you need 2 parts of the clear coat and 1 part of the hardener, because it's the MH78S. So 1 part this two parts, the clear coat, one part this, the hardener. And then we're going to do the same thing. We are going to use these filters, filter the clear coat into a cup, pour it into the paint gun, and then we are going to do 2 layers of the clear coat. I did do 3 layers of the paint just because I had extra paint left over, but it looks the same pretty much with 2 or 3 coats, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead, mix this up. You got to make sure your gun is thoroughly cleaned, otherwise you're going to have little hard pieces of paint in there. So that's important. I'm going to mix this together and start painting. So here's the final product of the hood. It's nice and smooth. I put the second clear coat on. I'm very happy with how it turned out. I hope you liked the video. And if you do, please click the like button. We would love it if you subscribe so you can see all of our upcoming videos. We have a whole bunch that we're going to upload.